chance to spend some time together. We went to private dinner last night with our wives, and just came to tell you that we're leaving. But it's wonderful to have him here. We've had a great conversations and always appreciate the opportunity to share ideas with you, Mr. President. And I especially enjoyed our time that Jill and I and Brigitte had last night in our visit. First time I've gone to dinner, a private dinner in Washington in a long, long time. And but I had the protection of the French government with me. But all kidding aside, France is one of our strongest partners, and historically, but one of our strongest partners and our most capable allies. And Emmanuel has also become a friend, in addition to being president of that great country. And we share the same values, and will remain the core common agenda that we address all challenges together. And occasionally we have some slight differences, but never in a fundamental way, so thus far, at least as long as I've been in Washington, and that's been more than a couple years. Today, we reaffirm that France and the United States, together with all our allies, all our NATO allies and European Union, the G7, stand as strong as ever against Russia's brutal war against Ukraine. We talked a lot about that in our bilateral meeting. And we'll continue the strong support to the people of Ukraine as they defend their homes and their families and their sovereignty and territorial integrity against Russian aggression, which has been incredibly brutal. I knew Russia was, but I didn't anticipate them being as brutal as they have been and what they've been doing. Many of the reporters in this room have been there themselves and covered from there, and they know what it's like. Today, we reaffirm that, as I said, we're going to stand together against this brutality. And we'll continue the strong support for the Ukrainian people as they defend their homes and their families and their nurseries, their hospitals, their sovereignty, their integrity, and against Russian aggression. And I want to thank you, Mr. President, for welcoming that the people of France have given to over 100,000 Ukrainian refugees. It's a mark of who you are as a people. And they're fleeing Putin's just barbarism. Putin thinks that he can crush the will of all those oppose his imperial ambitions. But attacking civilian infrastructures in Ukraine, choking off energy to Europe to drive up prices, exacerbating the food crisis, that's hurting very vulnerable people, not just in Ukraine, but around the world. And he's not going to succeed. President Macron and I have resolved that we're going to continue working together to hold Russia accountable for their actions and to mitigate the global impacts of Putin's war on the rest of the world. The United States is helping Europe diversify away from Russian natural gas in the immediate term, and while accelerating our clean energy transitions, and we're going to continue working in close partnership with Europe as we move forward. I welcome the progress we've already made in many of these issues through the US-EU Task Force on Energy Security. And today, we also committed to deepening cooperation between France and the United States on civil nuclear energy through our bilateral clean energy partnership. Around the world, France and the United States are working to strengthen stability and security. We share the vision, the same vision in the Indo-Pacific. We're looking for one Indo-Pacific that's free and open, prosperous and secure. And we're going to continue to strengthen our cooperation to defend core international principles in the Indo-Pacific, including freedom of navigation and freedom of overflight. We're working together to support the Middle East that is more integrated, peaceful, and prosperous. And we want to particularly thank President Macron for his efforts to help bring about the historic maritime boundaries agreement between Israel and Lebanon. We also stand with the people of Iran. And then the French and the United States are working together and hold accountable those responsible for the human rights abuses to counter Iran's support for Russia's war and to ensure that Iran does not ever acquire a nuclear weapon. And as we in the United States are looking forward to hosting the upcoming U.S.-African Leaders Summit, President Macron and I understand Africa's influence and importance, and he has much to add. France has much to add. We're also going to deepen our engagement, listening to and working with our African partners to help strengthen the governance and security and economic opportunities across the continent and to tackle the global challenges of our time. Our partnership also extends to cooperating in outer space, from coordinating defense of our space activities to strengthening scientific efforts to monitor Earth's changing climate. And we had a detailed discussion of the Inflation Reduction Act. I know none of you are curious about that, but we did talk about that a good deal. The United States and Europe share the goal of making bold investments in clean energy to meet the challenges of the climate crisis and to build the industries of the future, including batteries and green hydrogen. We agreed to discuss practical steps to coordinate and align our approaches so that we can strengthen and secure the supply chains, manufacturing, and innovation on both sides of the Atlantic. We ask our teams to follow up on this part as ongoing US-EU consultation continues, because we can work out some of the differences that exist. I'm confident. France and the United States are also leading efforts to strengthen the global health and global health security. President Macron visits falls on the World AIDS Day, and I want to particularly highlight our joint effort to reach our goal of ending the AIDS epidemic by 2030. That is a goal we set, a goal we're going to accomplish, and the goal we're sticking with. And to do it, we have all the tools we need. We just have to make finishing this fight a top priority for not just the two of us, but for other nations as well. And that's why I'm proud to take the baton from you, President Macron, and host the Global Fund's 7th Replenishment Conference this year, building on France's strong record of leadership. We've raised $15.7 billion with the United States and France as the two largest contributors to the Global Fund, and it's going to save millions, literally millions of lives. If I listed all the areas where cooperation between France and the United States were delivering meaningful progress, we'd be here until dinner time. So let me just close by highlighting our long-term investment to deepen the ties between our people, particularly the U.S.-French Fulbright program, which celebrates its 75th anniversary and has facilitated thousands of exchanges between our students, our educators, over the last decades. It's been critical to our relationship. It's a key part of ensuring that the future of this vital alliance remains strong and vibrant for generations to come. So Emmanuel, thank you again for all that our nations are doing together in cooperation. My administration has built our foreign policy around the strength of our alliances, and France is the very heart of that commitment. So merci, my friend, and I look forward to continuing to work with you. And as I used to say in the body I worked in a long time in the United States Senate, the floor is yours.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, dear Joe, thank you ever so much for these words that very much reflect the discussions we just had. But most importantly, thank you very much for your warm welcome. And indeed, together with my wife, Brigitte, we were very pleased to share this moment together with you and your spouse last night. And let me tell you how honored and moved we are, both my delegation and myself, to be here, invited by you on the occasion of this first state visit by your administration. And regarding this relationship, we said it this morning, and you just said it again, this heritage is based on life sacrifice, on so much. And I would like to say that over centuries, every time there was something vital at stake, we were there, one for the other, without any doubt, without any hesitation. And this is very much what should structure the rest of it. It is this spirit that is prevailing in the current circumstances since last February. And I did not repeat what President Biden perfectly described. And dear Joe, indeed, you very much describe what we're doing together in Ukraine. We clearly condemn this war immediately. We led all the diplomatic actions to condemn this war, the war crimes committed by Russia on the Ukrainian soil, and we support both the Ukrainian army that is resisting, the Ukrainian population resisting as well. And please allow me here to very much thank the United States of America for all the support provided, because this war is impacting the European soil even more directly, and you've chosen to invest so much to contribute to this joint effort. In this context, our discussion this morning was an opportunity to confirm the initiatives we will be taking once again in the coming weeks and months to keep supporting, to strengthen our support to the Ukrainian troops and to enable them to resist. We also agreed to continue to work together to support the Ukrainian people, to help them resist, because we can very well see today that the Russian war effort is very much targeting the civilian infrastructure, bringing even more violence to try and make the Ukrainian people desperate and make it impossible for them to survive this winter. This is the reason why we decided to organize on the 13th of December a conference to support Ukraine, and very much would like to thank you for the close cooperation in preparing for that event. And we're working in close cooperation with President Zelensky based on his 10-point plan that he proposed, and also would like to take this opportunity to commend the efforts of President Zelensky to try and find a way, a path to peace while leading this heroic resistance they've been organizing for 10 months. We always agreed, help Ukraine resist, never give up on anything in the UN Charter, prevent any risk of escalation in this conflict, and make sure that when the time comes, on the basis of conditions to be set by Ukrainians themselves, help build peace. And I believe your positions being so clear, it is something important to us, because we're both working for sustainable peace. We also talked about the direct and indirect consequences of this war, including on food security and energy security for the entire planet. And our joint initiatives within the G20, the G7, very much go in that direction. And we also recall this morning all of that, all we're doing to try and help all countries to weather the consequences of the conflict on their economies. This morning, we also had an excellent discussion on the IRA and the recent pieces of legislation adopted by the American administration. And like President Biden just said, we agreed to resynchronize our approaches, our agendas, in order to invest in critical emerging industries, semiconductors, batteries, hydrogen, everything that is absolutely decisive, because as a matter of fact, we share the same vision and the same willingness. President Biden wishes to create more industrial jobs in the long run for his country, and to build a strong industry and secure your supplies. And this is very much our approach as well. And this is the reason why we task our teams to continue this work in close cooperation, coordination, to find solutions on the topics we identified. And of course, we will coordinate with all of the Europeans and with you to have an agenda that will only bring more jobs, industry jobs in the United States as well as in Europe, and guarantee the strength and the resilience of our supply chains. And to do that with a strong integration. This European work is also the one we want to deliver on all of the issues on our agenda. And President, you just said it. What we would like to do as well is work on a number of topics of the future. And yesterday we had some sessions, working sessions, and our ministers and teams have been working as well, so that we could approve an agenda of hope and for the future. Like I said this morning, in the space industry, research, exploration, but as well the industry of the future, civil nuclear industry, here again with some common research projects, in particular on the most advanced technique. because I believe I can say on behalf of both of us that the civil nuclear industry is very much part of the energy mix in which we believe in, that will not only bring jobs, but enables us as well to have a secure supply and to meet our climate objectives. We also talked about the quantum issues with a number of stakeholders, innovation, and here as well our delegations are here to illustrate the work that is taking place so that we can deliver on that common agenda. Lastly, we also have all of our commitments on the major international challenges which are very much, I would say, feeding our relationship as well. And I can only tell you once again how pleased we were with your choices that very much match your history and your campaign commitments. The fact that you're back on major international challenges such as health and climate, it is really a new deal. And we've been resisting for a number of years, and now we're being able to re-engage with you. And on this day of World AIDS Day as well, we are very much continuing to work to deliver by 2030. And I would like to say how much has been achieved by both our countries, which are major contributors to the Global Fund, to deal with, of course, eradicate AIDS, but also malaria and a number of other diseases for the benefit of the most fragile populations. And the same goes in our relationship when we're doing everything we can to deal with climate change and biodiversity. Of course, we want more innovation, we want to promote solutions on climate change, but we also very concretely acknowledge a number of initiatives in this respect on the occasion of this state visit. It is about finding a new financing means for the most fragile countries, emerging countries, to support them on both development and climate change. And in this respect, you will be playing a key role in the summit we intend to organize next summer,
le Nord et le Sud, qui s'inscrit pleinement d'abord dans la logique de ce que nous avons fait ensemble pour réallouer plus de moyens vers les pays du Sud, mais aussi de l'agenda de réforme de nos institutions multilatérales, financières, qui est indispensable pour réussir cet objectif, en particulier réforme de la Banque mondiale et amélioration de nos instruments financiers existants. Et puis en matière de biodiversité, nous avons eu l'occasion hier de parler avec le caucus compétent. Nous avons eu des discussions à plusieurs reprises ensemble. Notre volonté est là aussi d'avoir un agenda extrêmement ambitieux et en particulier nous œuvrerons ensemble pour préparer le One Forest Summit qui se tiendra sur le sol africain au Gabon à la fin du premier trimestre prochain. Ce sujet étant aussi au cœur de ceux que vous voulez soulever avec les États africains que vous accueillerez dans quelques jours à Washington. Et donc là aussi, sur ce volet, il y a une forte convergence entre nos vues. Enfin, nous continuerons d'être engagés ensemble dans la lutte contre le terrorisme et pour la paix. En étant à vos côtés, j'ai évidemment une pensée pour nos soldats qui sont tombés en Afghanistan, au Proche-Moyen-Orient, en Afrique durant ces dernières années pour se battre pour la sécurité de ces régions du monde et de nos pays. Et je veux ici encore vous redire notre engagement. Nous continuons à être engagés dans notre coalition internationale Proche et Moyen-Orient à travers notre action militaire et nous continuerons de l'être de manière très étroite car nous n'avons pas fini ce combat. Je pense qu'il est important de rappeler à tous nos alliés et tous nos partenaires nous devons continuer d'agir contre le terrorisme islamiste dans le Proche et Moyen-Orient. Cet agenda n'est pas terminé. Je voulais vous remercier aussi pour l'aide précieuse que vous nous avez apportée durant toutes ces dernières années et que vous continuez de nous apporter dans la lutte contre le terrorisme au Sahel et en Afrique de l'Ouest. Cette aide est précieuse et nous a permis ces dernières années, y compris ces dernières semaines, d'avoir des résultats extrêmement concrets.
And that enabled us to have some very concrete results, including over the past few weeks. And we will continue to work together. I could carry on during the entire afternoon. We could talk about the Indo-Pacific, the way particularly we're reorganizing our presence in the Indian Ocean. To put things right, dear Joe, you elegantly
l'accord qui a
thank
été trouvé
France
historique
for
entre Israël et le Liban.
the role we played in the historical agreement between
Nous avons fait le
Israel and
maximum pour
Lebanon.
aider à
We
finaliser.
did our
Je crois
utmost
quand même que l'honnêteté me conduit à
to
dire que
finalize
c'est
the
essentiellement
accord,
vous qui avez
but
fait le
let me
travail.
be honest, I think most
Donc
of
je pense
the
que
work
dans
was
ce
yours.
moment, c'était un travail
So
essentiel
I think
et je veux tout
it was
particulièrement vous en remercier pour le
the
Liban
work
qui
of
nous
the
est si
utmost
cher
importance,
et
and
qui avait besoin de
Lebanon is
cet
so
accord
dear to us, and
au-delà
they
des
needed
sujets qui
this
sont au cœur de
accord
l'agenda libanais pour les prochaines semaines et les
in
prochains
the
mois.
context of
Voilà, mesdames et
everything
messieurs, ce que
that
je souhaitais
is
dire.
still on the
Et
agenda
pour
for
finir,
Lebanon in the coming weeks and months.
je souhaitais vraiment
Ladies
remercier
and
le
gentlemen,
président
I very
Joe
much
Biden parce que
meant to
ce qu'il a
thank
dit, je peux
President Biden
le dire à son endroit.
because
Ce n'est pas
what
simplement un
he said,
dirigeant
I
avec
can
lequel
say
nous
it as
partageons
well. You're
beaucoup de
not
valeurs,
just a leader with
combats,
whom we
c'est
share
un dirigeant avec lequel
many
nous avons
values, many
des
battles.
discussions très franches et
You're
très
someone
directes,
with whom we
respectueuses et
are having some very
engagées sur
frank
tous
and
les sujets.
respectful
C'est aussi
discussions
devenu un
on
ami
any topic.
et je
And
tenais à te remercier
you
pour
also became a
l'accueil
friend.
qui nous est fait,
And so
l'honneur qui nous est fait,
thank you ever so
mais
much
surtout
for this warm welcome
l'importance dans ce
and
moment
for the
de pouvoir passer du
importance
temps
of
ensemble et
being
prendre des
able to
décisions pour
spend
notre
some
avenir
time
commun.
together
Merci
now.
infiniment.
So important for our joint future. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Emmanuel. I began to refer to him privately as my closer. That deal with Lebanon and Israel, we did negotiate, but we needed a closer to get the job done, and you did it, and thank you very much. All right, we're going to take, we're each going to call on two people, a total of two people, total of four all total. And the first questioner is going to be from AFP, Miss End.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would have a question for you and one for the French President, if I may. To you first, you now say that you're going to better coordinate, especially your green economic policies. But yesterday, Emmanuel Macron said that the Inflation Reduction Act is in fact super aggressive, I quote, for European companies. Does it mean that you are ready to grant exemptions of derogations to European industries? And now my question to you, Monsieur le Président, est-ce que vous allez repartir de Washington avec l'assurance
Mr. President, will you leave Washington with the assurance
européenne pour faire face aux subventions massives qui ont été votées ici?
that
Et plus généralement, vous avez dit hier que
you will be able to deal with these massive subventions?
Joe Biden faisait courir le risque de fragmenter l'Occident. Est-ce qu'on peut
The journalist doesn't have a microphone.
d'une certaine manière risquer de créer des divisions?
Do you think there's a risk of generating divisions?
I'll answer the last question since I didn't hear any of it. I didn't understand a word of it, so I'll answer it.
I will take care of it.
No, look, the United States makes no apology, and I make no apology since I wrote it for the legislation you're talking about. But there are occasions when you write a massive piece of legislation, and that has almost $368 billion for the largest investment in climate change on all of history. And so there's obviously going to be glitches in it and need to reconcile changes in it. For example, there's a provision in it that says that there is an exception for anyone who has a free trade agreement with us. Well, that was added by a member of the United States Congress who acknowledges that he just meant allies. He didn't mean literally free trade agreement. So there's a lot we can work out. But the essence of it is we're going to make sure that the United States continues, and just as I hope Europe will be able to continue, not to have to rely on anybody else's supply chain. We are our own supply chain, and we share that with Europe and all of our allies, and they will, in fact, have the opportunity to do the same thing. So there's tweaks that we can make that can fundamentally make it easier for European countries to participate and or be on their own. But that is something that is a matter to be worked out. There is no fundamental, it was never intended when I wrote the legislation, never intended to exclude folks who were cooperating with us. That was not the intention. The intention was to make sure we're no longer in a position when there was a pandemic in Asia and China decided they're going to no longer sell us computer chips. We invented the damn things, so it's, anyway, but my point is we're back in business. Europe is back in business, And we're going to continue to create manufacturing jobs in America, but not at the expense of Europe.
Ce que nous avons échangé avec le président Biden, ce que le président Biden vient d'ailleurs de dire, ce que j'évoquais hier, les États-Unis d'Amérique ont pris une législation pour leur industrie et leur pays avec un objectif que nous partageons, créer plus d'emplois, créer des opportunités pour les classes moyennes et réussir à accélérer la transition climatique. La réalité, c'est que les conséquences, et notre discussion a permis de parfaitement montrer que ce n'est absolument pas l'objectif des États-Unis de le faire. Mais une des conséquences de cette législation est que sur des projets qui étaient en train de se développer sur le continent européen, l'écart de subvention est tel que ces projets risquent de tomber. Ça n'est pas l'intention du président Biden. J'ai pu hier d'ailleurs discuter avec plusieurs sénateurs et représentants Congrès. Ils m'ont assuré que ça n'était pas non plus leur intention. Et donc, la France n'est pas venue ici demander en quelque sorte pour son économie telle ou telle exception. On est venu partager la manière dont nous visions les conséquences de cette réglementation et à un moment où, au fond, l'actualité nous somme d'agir encore plus de manière concertée ensemble face aux défis mondiaux, de resynchroniser, comme j'ai pu le dire, c'est-à-dire de trouver une dynamique positive nouvelle pour se dire, clarifier quels sont nos objectifs et comment agir ensemble. La discussion de ce matin, pour moi, a été parfaitement claire. Et j'ai senti d'ailleurs la même intention chez l'ensemble des membres du Sénat comme des représentants hier. La volonté du président Biden est de refaire ici une industrie forte et d'avoir, en quelque sorte, de sécuriser des solutions technologiques pour l'avenir. La France veut exactement la même chose pour elle-même. Et nous nous battons jour et nuit depuis un peu plus de 5 ans pour faire la même chose dans notre pays, ce qui nous a permis de stopper près de 15 ans de désindustrialisation en France et de recréer des emplois industriels et des solutions dans notre pays. On veut juste continuer de faire cela. Et donc on va le faire ensemble, c'est pourquoi nous avons décidé, en lien avec les autres Européens, la Commission européenne, d'avoir un travail qui doit être un travail maintenant technique pour que, en quelque sorte, ces effets en domino qui pouvaient exister sur les projets qui étaient en train de se développer en Europe soient réglés. On veut réussir ensemble, pas l'un contre l'autre. Ça a été clair, c'est ce qui ressort de ce matin. Et c'est exactement la philosophie que je partage, c'est celle dont nous avons besoin.
Bonjour messieurs les présidents, William Galibert pour la radio RTL. Pour compléter la question de ma collègue, monsieur Biden, en français on dit qu'il n'y a pas d'amour, qu'il n'y a que des preuves d'amour. Est-ce que vous avez l'impression que votre ami français repart entièrement rassuré, que vous avez rassuré sur les questions économiques vos alliés européens? Et puis, pourrait-on avoir quelques précisions supplémentaires? Est-ce que vous vous êtes fixé, monsieur Macron, des échéances précises pour ces discussions économiques, des secteurs précis sur lesquels vous attendez peut-être des aménagements des politiques économiques américaines?
Pour être très clair, d'abord, nous avons un travail en européen qu'on va faire. C'est que sur les semi-conducteurs, l'hydrogène, les batteries, notre industrie, on va continuer d'avancer en européen. Et nous ne sommes pas là pour, en quelque sorte, demander des preuves d'amour. On était là pour se mettre d'accord sur une stratégie et clarifier les choses qui méritaient de l'être. Je considère que la discussion l'a fait. Maintenant, nous avons notre propre travail. On ne peut pas demander aux États-Unis d'Amérique de prendre une loi pour régler les problèmes de l'Europe. Donc nous, en Européens, on doit aller plus vite et plus fort pour avoir la même ambition et réussir justement à se mettre aussi en synchronie. Et de l'autre côté, nous avons clarifié aujourd'hui les choses. Il y a plusieurs déjà forums de discussion qui existent. Et c'est dans les prochaines semaines et les prochains mois que nous allons clarifier ça. Mais ça va assez vite, parce qu'en fait, nos projets sont en train de se développer. Donc, pour moi, il y a une grande clarté stratégique dans les échanges de ce matin. Il y a eu beaucoup de sincérité, beaucoup de franchise. Et donc, à partir de là, je considère que les discussions des prochains jours qu'il y aura déjà avec la Commission européenne, les discussions qu'on aura dans les prochaines semaines, en lien étroit avec nos partenaires allemands, nos autres partenaires européens et la Commission et l'administration américaine, vont permettre de clarifier sans difficulté ce sujet. Je repars confiant, mais aussi lucide sur ce qui est aussi à faire du côté européen.
Confident, but as well lucid as to what remains to be done on the European side, which is a good thing.
I'm confident. That's my answer. Okay, who's the next question? Got my list here. Is it my turn to call on someone? Right? Okay, how about NPR, Tom Keith?
Thank you, Mr. President. I have a domestic question for you, and then Mr. Macron, I have a question for you about Ukraine. But first, President Biden, do the freight rail workers deserve more than 1 day of paid sick leave, like millions of Americans have? And if so, why didn't you negotiate for that when you were helping to negotiate that contract that you now want Congress to impose?
I love you guys. I negotiated a contract no one else could negotiate. The only thing that was left out was whether or not it was paid leave. You know, I've been trying to get paid leave, not just for rail workers, for everybody. But that other team, they're called the Republicans, they voted against it. They said we couldn't do it. We're one of the few nations in the world that don't have paid leave for our workers. And so what we're doing is we can't afford to have, and by the way, in the meantime, they got a 45% increase in salary, et cetera. There's a lot of good things that happened in that. And in fact, this shuts down over the question of 1 to 5 paid, or 7 or 9, whatever the numbers would be negotiated of paid leave days. It's going to immediately cost 750,000 jobs and cause a recession. And so what I've made it really clear is that what was negotiated was so much better than anything they ever had, that it's worth, and they all signed on to it, by the way. There are only 4 unions out of the 13 or 14 that didn't agree. So the majority at the time was that I presented it. They asked me to do it. I presented it. They all signed on. But here's the story. It doesn't mean because we are going to pass this, God willing, by Friday, by the time, by the weekend, that I'm going to back off of paid leave. I made it really clear. I'm going to continue to fight for paid leave for not only rail workers, but for all American workers. I imagine it may surprise some of our European friends that there's no paid leave in the United States of America. We're one of the few major countries in the world that don't have it. And it's about time. And so that's the context in which this all took place. And labor signed on to it as well, as you recall, initially. There were 4 unions out of the, I think, 13 or 14 that didn't like it. But I think we're going to get it done, but not within this agreement. Not within this agreement. We're going to avoid the rail strike, keep the rails running, keep things moving, and I'm going to go back and we're going to get paid leave, not just for rail workers, but for all workers.
President Macron, here in the U.S., President Biden is asking Congress for $38 billion of additional funding for support for Ukraine. There's been some pushback from Republicans in Congress saying that they cannot continue to write a blank check. So do you have confidence that the United States will be able to continue supporting Ukraine's defense in the way it has over the past year, in the months going forward? And did you talk to President Biden about trying to urge Ukraine to negotiate to end this war, especially with winter bearing down and the effects on energy prices?
Look, I do thank President Biden and his administration for the great commitment they had vis-à-vis Ukrainian people. And let me just say that our 2 nations are made of values and history. And what is at stake in Ukraine is not just very far from here, in a small country somewhere in Europe, but it's about our values, and it's about our principles, and it's about what we agreed together in the UN Charter, protecting sovereignty, in territorial integrity. And this is why I do believe that having the US strongly supporting the Ukrainians in that time is very important, not just for the Ukrainians. For the Europeans, we are. This is why we do thank you for this solidarity. But for the stability of our world today. Because if we consider that we can abandon the country and abandon the full respect of these principles, it means that there is no possible stability in this world. So I think it's extremely important to have you so much committed. So I'm confident because I think your people and representative do endorse and understand these objectives. We will follow up our own support. We increased our military support. We increased our economic support. We are increasing our humanitarian support. And for the second question you raised, let me tell you that we will never urge the Ukrainians to make a compromise which will not be acceptable for them. Because they are so brave and they defend precisely their lives, their nation, and our principles. And because it will never build a sustainable peace. If we want a sustainable peace, we have to respect the Ukrainians to decide the moment and the conditions in which they will negotiate about their territory and their future.
This will be the last question.
Emmanuel Macron doit s'entretenir dans les prochains jours, les prochaines semaines avec Vladimir Poutine. Le lien est maintenu depuis le début de la guerre. Vous n'avez pas toujours été d'accord avec cela. Est-ce qu'aujourd'hui vous approuvez l'approche du président français? Une deuxième question pour vous deux, alors que la guerre en Ukraine semble aujourd'hui à un tournant. Est-ce qu'il vous semble réaliste que le président Zelensky conditionne l'ouverture de négociations à un retour, je veux dire, dans le giron ukrainien de la Crimée? Merci.
Look, there's one way for this war to end, the rational way. Putin to pull out of Ukraine, number one. But it appears he's not going to do that. He's paying a very heavy price for failing to do it, but he's inflicting incredible carnage on the civilian population of Ukraine, bombing nurseries, hospitals, children's homes. It's sick what he's doing. But the fact of the matter is, I have no immediate plans to contact Mr. Putin. Mr. Putin is, let me choose my words very carefully. I'm prepared to speak with Mr. Putin if, in fact, there is an interest in him deciding he's looking for a way to end the war. He hasn't done that yet. If that's the case, in consultation with my French and my NATO friends, I'll be happy to sit down with Putin to see what he has in mind. He hasn't done that yet. In the meantime, I think it's absolutely critical what Emmanuel said. We must support the Ukrainian people. The idea that Putin is ever going to defeat Ukraine is beyond comprehension. Imagine them trying to occupy that country for the next 2, 5, 10, 20 years, if they could. He's miscalculated every single thing he initially calculated. He thought he'd be greeted with open arms by the Russian-speaking portions of the Ukrainian population. Go back and read his speech when he invaded, when I said they were going to invade, and they did when we said they were. Go back and read the speech he made. He talked about him with needing to be another Peter the Great. He talked about the need for the people of Kyiv as the mother lode of Russian identity in the beginning, et cetera, et cetera. He's just miscalculated across the board. And so the question is, what is his decision? How does he get himself out of the circumstance he's in? I'm prepared, if he's willing to talk, to find out what he's willing to do, but I'll only do it in consultation with my NATO allies. I'm not going to do it on my own. Thank you.
Sur la question que vous posez et les préconditions ou les conditions qui sont mises par le président ukrainien, je pense que ce qui est important pour nous tous de regarder, c'est qu'au moment même où l'Ukraine est en train de résister, de subir des crimes de guerre, de subir des attaques sur ses infrastructures civiles, de mener des contre-offensives, le président Zelensky a proposé un plan de paix en 10 points. Et je pense que notre devoir, c'est d'engager le travail avec lui, parce qu'il y a une vraie volonté de la part des Ukrainiens d'aller sur le terrain de la discussion. Et nous le reconnaissons et nous le saluons. Et je peux ici vous dire, pour avoir été pendant plusieurs années responsable du suivi de ce qu'on appelait le format Normandie, et donc de la mise en œuvre des accords de Minsk. La dernière réunion qu'il y a eu entre le président Zelensky et le président Poutine, elle date, c'est d'ailleurs la seule, de décembre 2019. Et nous étions à cette époque-là avec la chancelière Merkel. Je peux vous dire que j'ai vu un président sincère qui voulait discuter et négocier. Et le président Zelensky, depuis son élection jusqu'au mois de février dernier, il n'a eu de cesse de vouloir négocier. Celui qui a décidé de lancer une guerre, c'est le président Poutine. J'en ai été le témoin direct, y compris par le déplacement que j'ai pu faire en Russie et en Ukraine au début du mois de février. Donc il est légitime que le président Zelensky ait des préconditions pour négocier. Maintenant, nous devons travailler la substance de ce qui peut être à terme un accord de paix. Et ensuite, c'est l'évolution des prochaines semaines et des prochains mois qui nous dira le moment qui est le bon et le choix des Ukrainiens. Une fois qu'on a dit ça, je continuerai en effet à parler au président Poutine, et d'ailleurs, on s'en a entretenu ce matin avec le président Biden, parce que nous avons constamment essayé aussi d'éviter des escalades et d'obtenir des choses très concrètes. Et donc, en particulier, j'aurai une discussion sur la question de la sûreté et de la sécurité des centrales nucléaires dans les zones contestées, en particulier celle de Zaporizhzhia, parce que je pense que le travail que la France mène depuis plusieurs mois, et d'ailleurs depuis le début du conflit, rappelez-vous, on l'a fait dès le mois de mars sur la centrale de Tchernobyl, en soutien du très bon travail fait par l'AIEA et son directeur général, M. Grossi, est important. Donc il faut continuer de faire cela et d'engager. Nous continuerons. Voilà. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you so much.
Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, please remain in your seats until the official delegations have departed.